She slid the paper across the table between bites of toast and jam. It was a bright Sunday morning. Windows open, sunlight pooling across the kitchen floor. A breeze stirred the corners of the typed document like it knew what it was made of. "Just something I think could help us communicate better," she said, almost breezily. "Boundaries. You know, healthy ones." I didn't pick it up right away. Instead, I studied her face. She looked calm. A little too calm. The kind of rehearsed calm you wear like perfume, meant to sell something, cover something, distract from something. Eventually, I read it. Relationship boundaries, typed in bold at the top, like it had been written for a seminar, not a marriage. There were bullet points, 10 of them, some generic, some oddly specific, each one chiseled like a rule etched in stone. No raised voices during disagreements. Solo travel is encouraged for self-growth. Social media activity is not subject to partner review. And then, no unannounced calls or visits during girls' nights. I reread that one twice. That sentence didn't sound like her. It sounded like someone else. Amber. Her best friend since college. Recently divorced. Always smirking when I showed affection. Always slipping those little comments into conversation like oil beneath your shoes. Subtle, slick, designed to make you fall. "Monogamy is a phase," Amber once said at a party, swirling her wine. "Not a virtue." She looked at my wife when she said it. My wife hadn't disagreed. I didn't ask where this document came from. I didn't point out that girls' nights were happening more frequently lately, or that she used to scoff at anything that sounded like therapy by bullet point. I just folded it quietly and slid it into the drawer beside the placemats. She cleared the dishes while humming a song I didn't recognize. Later that night, she got dressed to go out again. Hair curled, heels. That burgundy dress she'd once worn on our anniversary dinner, back when she'd said it was too special to wear for just anyone. "I'll be late," she said, checking herself in the mirror by the door. I nodded, watched her from the couch. She smiled, but not at me, at her reflection, like she was practicing something. When the door shut behind her, I didn't get up right away. I stared at that door for a long time. Then I got the boundary list back out. Read it again. It was structured like legal prep. Carefully chosen phrases. No warmth. No room for dialogue. Just declarations, cut and pasted into my life like I'd agreed to them without realizing. Amber's voice lingered in every line. Her fingerprints without the prints. It was the first moment I realized my marriage had been rewritten without me. But I didn't accuse. Didn't chase. Didn't text to ask where she really was. Instead, I sat back, poured myself a drink, and did something I hadn't done in years. I started taking notes. I didn't start with her phone. I started with her shoes. That Wednesday, she came home at 11:17 p.m. Her voice floated through the front door before she did, laughing at something that wasn't funny. She walked straight past the living room without looking in, hung up her coat, then stopped to take off her heels. I heard the soft clink of one of them tipping against the wall. That mattered. She'd been wearing stilettos, not the wedges she used to wear for movies. These were the kind she only wore when she wanted to feel seen. And there it was again, that scent. Not just her perfume, but something fresh, faintly masculine, like sandalwood and air conditioning. It clung to her neck and the inside of her coat. She came into the living room and acted like nothing was different. Sat beside me on the couch. Her phone buzzed once. She tilted the screen away before replying, thumb moving quick. "What movie did you watch?" I asked, like I was half distracted by the game. She didn't even hesitate. "Old rom-com, Amber picked it." I nodded and took a sip of water. She didn't ask what I'd been doing. Just pulled a blanket over her lap and scrolled through her feed until midnight. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I checked the coat pocket. The receipt wasn't there. I hadn't expected it would be. But the subtle details were. No ticket stub. No snack wrappers. No lip balm she usually carried for long nights in. Just a folded cloth napkin from a restaurant she'd once told me was too overpriced for what it is. That afternoon, I pulled up our joint credit card activity. She'd wanted to keep things streamlined, so most recurring things still ran through it. Utilities, groceries, occasional ride shares. There it was. Wednesday night. 9:23 p.m. Rideshare from downtown to a residential address that definitely wasn't Amber's. I typed the address into Google Maps. The pin dropped east of the city, near the waterfront. A stretch of high-rise condos and luxury rentals. I zoomed in. No theaters. No restaurants. just residences. She'd been picked up there before coming home. I didn't call her out. Didn't even change my tone the next time we talked. Instead, I started watching for Wednesdays and Sundays, patterns, repeats. The times when she came home freshly spritzed and extra careful with her words. The next clue came by mail. I was working from home when I heard the mail drop. Normally, she grabbed it. But that day, I beat her to the door. One envelope caught my attention. A postcard, glossy, hand-addressed to her, with a photo of a rooftop pool and the words, "Welcome to Elevated Living, Derek's Tower at Marina Row." Derek, our financial advisor, the one who helped us set up joint accounts, investment allocations, estate planning. A friend. A man who stood up at our wedding and toasted, forever, on our behalf. The back of the card was stamped with a resident welcome message from the condo association. Not junk. Not marketing. It was personal. It was a welcome note. I flipped it over and stared at the print. She hadn't mentioned Derek in over a year. Not since she insisted we split our account notifications, for mental clarity. At the time, I'd been buried in work, distracted. I'd nodded. Now I saw it for what it was, quiet exile. She hadn't shut me out of our finances. She'd walked into them, and shut the door behind her. She walked in later that evening, humming again. Light on her feet. Too light. The way people move when they believe they're invisible. I asked how her day was. She kissed me on the cheek. "We need dish soap," she said, and disappeared into the bathroom. I didn't follow. I stayed in the kitchen, pulled out a sticky note, and wrote down the condo address from the postcard. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet, but the pieces were lining up. She hadn't just drifted. She'd started paving a second life, and I was already watching the exit take shape. A week later, Derek's name surfaced again, this time, buried in a bland transaction labeled consulting fee. It hit our shared account the day after one of her overnight self-care weekends. No location listed. Just a $1,750 transfer to an entity I didn't recognize until I traced the routing number. It led back to Derek's boutique advisory firm. Just routine maintenance. She used to call financial reshuffling. That phrase echoed in my head now, like the shell of something once benign. The memory hit me out of nowhere. Her birthday dinner 3 years ago. Candlelight. Laughter. Derek sat across from her. He made a joke, something off-color, something private. She laughed too hard. I laughed with them, not knowing I was on the outside of the joke. The punchline. The placeholder husband. She always said he was just brilliant with numbers. Said it like it excused his casual familiarity. The little touches on her wrist when they talked. That night, I waited until she was asleep before opening the desk drawer in her home office. I wasn't searching. I was confirming. What I found made my stomach turn. It was a letter, never mailed, never sealed. A first draft, creased in the middle. "When this is over, I'll finally be able to breathe," it read. She'd signed it M. She only used that initial when she was in love. The early days of our marriage, every sticky note, every silly little card, she'd sign that way. Just M. Not her full name. Not her initials. Just that single, looping letter. Below the letter was a manila folder. Labeled in her handwriting, "Future Plans." I didn't want to open it, but I did. Inside were spreadsheets, printed checklists, post-it tabs dividing the sections. Some were written in her hand, others weren't. I recognized Derek's handwriting immediately. Slanted, efficient. He once wrote us a handwritten thank you after we referred a friend to his firm. These weren't thank yous. They were task lists. Transfer remaining equity. Phase out recurring alerts. Restructure investments under personal LLC. Establish independent credit lines X3. Each task was checked off. Dated. One tab read, August. Another. Exit strategy. That phrase didn't belong in a marriage folder. But here it was, filed, indexed, and almost complete. I closed the folder and put it back exactly as I found it. I spent the next few days like a man suspended above a trapdoor. Everything around me looked intact. We made dinner. She texted me updates from work. We watched a documentary on Friday night and laughed in the right places. But I saw her differently now. Saw the micro-calculations behind her smiles. The soft avoidance in her voice when she talked about next summer, like it was ours. She was rehearsing a goodbye she hadn't said out loud yet. I wasn't sure how long she'd been planning it. Months? A year? 2? But one thing was clear. She wasn't waiting to leave me. She was waiting until it cost her nothing. And Derek, our advisor, our supposed friend, was holding the door open. It came back to me in pieces. 2 years ago, she'd stood in the kitchen holding a stack of refinance documents. The interest rates were changing, she said. The bank needed new signatures. She spoke quickly, confidently, like someone checking off a to-do list before heading out the door. "There's a power of attorney clause in here," she'd said. "It's just general. In case something comes up while you're traveling." I was working late hours back then. I barely glanced at the fine print. I signed. Now I remembered the way she watched me do it. Not like someone relieved to have it handled, but like someone clocking the moment a lock turned. That document gave her access. Legal, full-spectrum access, and she used it. I pulled up our account histories, not the normal interfaces she showed me when we'd sit down for our monthly check-ins. I went deeper, logged into archived statements she hadn't bothered to scrub. It took me a few tries to find the old credentials. I'd written them down once in a battered notebook I kept in the garage, tucked under a box of tools she never touched. What I found made everything click. Over the last 18 months, she'd been moving funds. Nothing flashy. Small transfers, spaced apart, recategorized as recurring allocations, or short-term yield optimization, financial white noise. But each one built a pattern. She hadn't just been planning an exit, she'd been siphoning the fuel to drive it. Accounts that used to notify both of us now showed a single point of contact, hers. Alerts rerouted. Authorizations revoked. Shared visibility had quietly become personal control. Amber's name came up again when I looked through her recent call logs, visible on the family account dashboard that, until now, she hadn't thought to disconnect. Their calls were long. Too long. Frequent. Usually around the time she came home from solo retreats, or personal clarity weekends. Amber, who treated relationships like leases with break clauses. Amber, who once told me marriage was a security blanket for people afraid to start over. She hadn't just whispered in my wife's ear. She'd helped draw the map out. Amber's own divorce had been brutal, messy in the courts, ruinous in her reputation. I remembered how bitter she was after, how she warned my wife, "Never let a man hold the pen when it's time to sign the exit papers." Now I could see the echo of that warning in every move my wife made. She had prepared the terrain in silence, while I cooked dinner, while we took weekend walks and laughed at podcasts. She was cutting emotional ties and financial anchors all at once. The most chilling realization came from a single folder buried in her email archives, one she thought she deleted. Phase 2, Independent Transition. It was a checklist, same formatting, same fonts as the future plans folder in her desk. But this one included projected legal expenses, potential joint asset liquidation plans, even a section on narrative framing. That section listed potential phrases for post-separation conversations, suggestions like, "We just grew apart. He became emotionally unavailable. I needed to find my own voice." None of those were true. Not even close. I hadn't disappeared. I'd been there the whole time. Steady. Present. Trusting. And she'd used that trust as leverage. The phrase that haunted me most came from a note attached to one of Derek's annotated spreadsheets. He'd written, "We just need to keep it clean until Q3. After that, it's a soft landing." A soft landing. Like this was a project, a timeline, a risk-managed dismount. Not a marriage. Not a life built over 11 years. Not the countless nights I'd held her when she cried after her mother passed. Not the nights she held me when my father's memory started slipping. Not the anniversaries, the whispered jokes, the quiet resilience we thought we had. She was preparing to land safely, and she was making sure I didn't. I sat in the guest room for hours that night, staring at the files. No rage. Just silence. A bone-deep stillness that only comes when you realize someone's already closed the door behind you. You just didn't hear the click. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I was awake. Fully, quietly, dangerously awake. She had the map. But I'd just found my compass, and I was about to redraw the terrain. She came home late again. Thursday this time. The kind of late that made even her girls' night excuse sound lazy. Her heels clicked across the hardwood just past midnight. She moved quietly, but not the careful kind of quiet you use when you're considerate. This was the quiet of someone hoping not to be noticed. Too late. The table was already set. Not dramatically, just 2 plates, A simple dinner still warm. Like I'd waited because I cared. Like nothing was wrong. She blinked when she saw it. "Oh," she said, a touch too bright. "I thought you'd be asleep." I shrugged. "You said you'd be back by 10. She gave a quick laugh. Dismissive. A brush off wrapped in charm. Amber and I got caught up talking. I didn't ask what about. Didn't mention the quiet tone her phone took every time she mentioned Amber's name, or the way the GPS data I pulled last night told a different story. "Sit," I said gently. She hesitated a beat, then pulled out the chair. Dinner was quiet. We talked about unimportant things. Her job. A neighbor's new fence. She mentioned Derek once, in passing. Something about a quarterly update she'd have to follow up on. She didn't flinch when she said his name. That scared me more than anything. After we cleared the plates, I poured her a glass of wine, then reached behind me and set a folder on the table. She looked at it like it might bite. Inside was everything. The postcard from Derek's building, the future plans folder, the spreadsheets she thought were hidden, the invoice marked consulting fee, tied directly to their shared shell account, the relationship boundaries document, her manifesto of detachment. I slid it toward her without a word. She stared at it. Then at me. Her fingers hovered above the edge, but she didn't open it. "What is this?" she asked, voice low. "You wrote the rules," I said evenly. "I'm just enforcing the consequences." She tried to laugh. That nervous, performative laugh she used when she needed the upper hand back. "I don't know what you think you found, but don't," I said. Calm. Not loud. Not angry. Just final. Her mouth opened, closed. She glanced back down at the folder like it might rearrange itself into something less damning. "It's not what it looks like," she finally managed. I didn't speak. She flipped open the folder, scanned the first page, then the second. Her face changed, not fear, not yet, but calculation, her brain scrambling for footholds, for anything she could still control. "You shouldn't have gone through my private files." There it was. The pivot. The wounded indignation. "You created a parallel life," I said quietly, "and you budgeted it, scheduled it, documented it." She looked up. There was something in her eyes then. Not rage. Not remorse. Just the awful, chilling recognition that I wasn't who she'd left behind anymore. "You don't understand what it's been like." "I did," I said, "until about a month ago." Silence stretched between us. "I wasn't planning to hurt you," she whispered, "but you were planning without me." I stood, walked past her. She didn't reach for me. At the guest room door I paused, not for drama, just for air. Then I turned the lock behind me. I heard her move back into the kitchen, heard the soft thud of the folder being closed. No crying, no shouting, just paper meeting wood. Her boundaries had worked. She'd built the silence she wanted, and now I was living in it. Only difference? This silence was mine now. The next morning, she woke to a different house. Not in appearance. Everything still stood where it had, but the control had shifted. She didn't feel it at first. Not when she poured her coffee or checked her messages. But by the time she tried to log into our shared account and the prompt read, "Access denied," I imagine it landed. I'd been up before her. Cancelled all joint credit cards. Froze the checking account. Transferred half of our savings into a new, legally ring-fenced account under my name, through a private advisor she didn't know. I'd filed the divorce papers just after sunrise. Irreconcilable differences. No accusations. No fireworks. Just a signature, a timestamp, and a plan. Later that day, I submitted a formal complaint to Derek's advisory firm. Included a digital copy of the consulting fee invoice, cross-referenced against our financial records. I also attached a brief summary outlining potential conflicts of interest, misuse of fiduciary duty, and financial misconduct connected to both his professional role and his personal involvement. I didn't add color. Didn't need to. Facts do their own talking. Within days, something shifted. His firm's homepage removed his profile. A simple reshuffle, no announcements. But by week 2, mutual acquaintances in the finance community were asking questions. One of them, a client I'd referred years ago, reached out privately. "Saw your name mentioned in a background inquiry. Everything okay?" I told him the truth, without dressing it up or down. Getting divorced. Realized Derek was helping her out of the marriage more than he was helping us inside it. The client replied 3 hours later. "I pulled my portfolio today. The unraveling was slow, but it was happening. She, meanwhile, leaned into damage control. Instagram posts about toxic cycles and finding peace. Filtered selfies with captions about boundaries as self-love. The same language she typed into the rules she'd slid across the table. A few mutual friends unfollowed me. Expected. But more message directly. Quiet support. Apologies. A few variations of the same sentence. We didn't know. We're with you. She called once. I didn't answer. She emailed twice. The subject lines were civil. Can we talk? And let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I left them unread. Nothing she wrote could reverse the ledger she'd built behind my back. Through the lawyer, she tried a predictable play. Emotional abandonment. He was distant, absent, unwilling to grow emotionally. But my documentation was clean. I'd archived text threads, pulled photos, copies of our joint therapy bills, calendar logs of date nights I'd initiated and weekends I'd planned, records of her solo trips, the ones she took after the boundaries list, always citing mental recharge. It was a slow burn. No explosive courtroom drama. No slammed doors or screaming matches. Just the steady application of truth, paper, and precision. By the third week, her strategy had shifted from aggressive to confused. She wasn't losing the upper hand in a single moment. She was watching it dissolve, like ink under running water. I took back the things that mattered. Locked down what was mine. Not to punish. Not even to win. But to survive. And survive with clarity. My friends rallied. My lawyer respected the prep. My nights were quieter, but they didn't feel empty. They felt earned. She stopped posting after a while. I guess the narrative stopped serving her. Or maybe she realized you can't control a story when someone else owns the evidence. One afternoon, I walked into the house after a run. Sat at the dining table, the same one where she'd once handed me her exit plan dressed up as relationship work. I looked around. The silence had changed. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was honest. I didn't expect the call. It came from a state financial oversight office. The kind of agency most people never hear from unless they've broken something important. The voice was professional. Cold, but polite. We're conducting a regulatory review into advisory practices involving Derek Langley, she said. Your complaint, along with related financial documentation, has been included in the formal investigation. I listened. Took notes. She kept it brief. But then came the part one wasn't expecting. Given the transactional involvement of your spouse in several co-signed transfers linked to the flagged accounts, she may be subject to civil review. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I asked quietly, she's under investigation? Her name appears in multiple capacities across the financial trail. We're notifying relevant parties as a matter of protocol. A week later, a letter arrived. Not handwritten, not emotional, just a formal, unblinking envelope with her name in the subject line and mine as a CC'd party of legal record. Her accounts were being audited. The phrase felt surgical, distant. But I imagined how it landed. Because this wasn't about our marriage anymore. This was about what she signed, what she knew, what she co-engineered, by trying to ensure her soft landing. She'd tied herself to Derek in more ways than she realized. And now, his freefall was pulling her into its wake. The next message came by text. Different number. Unfamiliar area code. Please, can we talk? No name. No apology. Just that single word at the end. Please. It sat on my screen like a pulse. I stared at it for a minute. Maybe more. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. 3 days after that, I got a forwarded email from a mutual friend at a downtown firm. Subject line. Internal notice. Pending investigation suspension. Her name was there, along with a dry announcement that she'd been placed on unpaid administrative leave. Pending review of external inquiries into financial practices and fiduciary compliance. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just closed the email and exhaled for the first time in days. The house was quiet that night. The way it used to be when peace was real, not just performed. But the final twist wasn't her downfall. It was the moment I realized I wasn't chasing answers anymore.